This presentation is a little bit of consciousness raising. So I've been doing a lot of studying of the 60s, 70s, 80s liberation movements over the past year or so, and I have just had my whole world turned upside down. And so I want to bring some of that to this space as it relates to youth oppression. So this is about recognizing the power in our everyday lives. First, there is a very recent case in the Supreme Court of the United States that ruled in favor of a cheerleader who expressed discontent with their school by using profanity. They ruled that profanity used outside of the school grounds is acceptable and that the school could not suspend her for her expressions. So this is like a huge win, especially for us, and the concept of student voice can be unpopular amongst school officials. And this means that students can't be punished for speaking out. It's really an important addition to the Des Moines independent schools versus Tinker case, which ruled students couldn't be punished for like peaceful protest in school. So this is just another addition onto that. And I wanted to open with that because that was super, super recent. So reframing youth oppression. So oppression has come to be like a very dirty word in today's politics. There are some people that don't want our kids to be taught that they're oppressed because it makes them bad workers or they blame themselves. And they're caught up in these concepts of individualism. But when we talk about oppression, we need to understand what it truly means. And it's about the unjust treatment of individuals over a prolonged period of time. But for youth, for childhood, we've come to understand that minors supposedly have fewer rights than adults. No right to make decisions for themselves when a capable parent or guardian can take care of them instead. And when I'm saying oppression in the context of youth, I'm not talking about individual actors making individual decisions, but of a system of oppression that cascades into culture and over time into a social construction. And for those of you that may not have heard that phrase before, a social construction is a fancy way of saying that we have a shared understanding of the world. And in this case, that shared understanding is about childhood. The innocence and purity that we come to associate with children was not always our perception of youth. And even when I say the word children, is it bringing an image to your mind of like toys and unbounding happiness? Because that's what it does for me. But the way that I understand youth now, after having gone through my studies, is that we are completely capable of having agency. It's just never been allowed to us until we become adults. And so I want to also pretext, I'm not saying that we should abolish childhood as a shared understanding or social construction, but that we should re-examine the effect that this shared understanding has on our lives. Adults in our lives, teachers, parents, coaches, bosses, even complete strangers are given immediate power over us because of age. But why? Are they infinitely more capable or smarter? Is it their experience, their titles? And it's actually all of the above. Because we give power to merit in our society, and youth enter the world meritless, forced to prove themselves before a pinch of power can be handed to them. Youth are not inherently given seats at the table. We have to fight for it. We have to work for it. Even today, the US is still not signed on to the rights of the child. Many of those articles giving youth the agency they need to participate in their education, in their work lives, to have the right to be able to have a seat at the table. Yet our contributions are still helping to make the world a better place. And so I want to reiterate, youth are as capable as anyone. These are just protests, but there are so many other ways that youth contribute to our lives and to our society. Just the easiest one is the fight for justice. Um, Young people are the most likely, the most equipped to speak out against injustice because they're not being weighed down by societal standards, by, oh, will I lose my job if I speak out on this issue? What will people think of me? We're still developing ourselves, so we still know that we can change our opinions. We can, fight for what's right. But we've seen, time and time again throughout history, and you simply need to look up youth activism and find the Wikipedia page, that there have been prominent moments in history that have been changed by youth. And what goes unmentioned a lot of the time is the labor that goes into this. The countless youth who go unthanked for their contributions to society, or have their labor stolen, their products stolen. It doesn't just take place in protests, like I said, but in the self-learning that we have to do to continue this betterment into our adult lives. It is a lifetime of learning to be a good person. And I might be a little biased in saying that I think today's youth are on the right track. We see the inequality, we see the oppression, we see how unfair and unjust society is at points. But I'm getting way ahead of myself, and I'm going to bring it back down. Today, we're going to start in schools, which is a commonality for all of us, and what's brought us to the International Summit on Student Voice. So, some quick history on the development of schooling. Please use the clap function on your Zoom if you've ever been disciplined. If you've ever been disciplined for any reason outside school in your entire life. I can't see, but I'm assuming people are clapping. This is a quote from Shulamith Firestone from The Dialectic of Sex that kind of goes into this. She says that the real architects and innovators were the moralists, pedagogues, so people that were developing teaching, developing learning of the 17th century. These were the men at the origins of both the concept of childhood and its institutionalization, the modern concept of schooling. They were the first espousers of the weakness of the innocence or the purity that we talked about a little earlier. They put childhood on a pedestal, using this childhood innocence in a way that is meant to benefit them. They preached the segregation of children from the adult world. Discipline was the keynote to modern schooling, much more important finally than the imparting of learning or information. For to them, discipline was an instrument of moral and spiritual improvement, adapted less for its efficiency in directing large groups to work in common than for its intrinsic moral and aesthetic value. That is, repression itself was adopted as a spiritual value. She is saying a lot here, but the most important part of what she's saying is that adults imparted the segregation of childhood versus adulthood. Believe it or not, it didn't always used to be children go to school until they're 18, and then they move out of their parents' house, and then they go do something with their lives. In the 17th century, before, sorry, I'm glancing at the time. In the 17th century, before we actually had schools and childhood, children were working alongside adults as like apprentices, actually like making a living, having their personal lives. Childhood sexuality wasn't as taboo as it is today. But children were commodified along with this introduction of innocence. So putting children on a pedestal, it was often used as a class marker. You could dress up your kids as cute dolls, and they would be kind of like your new like Gucci handbag. So it sounds really bad because it is bad, but how that's evolved over the last 300-400 years has put us to where we are today with modern schooling. So moving back to discipline a little bit, psychologists know that like disciplinary models don't work today. We know as youth that it often doesn't work. Yet students are rarely given the opportunity to share their opinion. And this is by design. This is by design of a system that wishes to keep us out of power. Our education, at least speaking from US experience of education, is designed in a way to keep us from thinking critically about the whys and the hows of the rules in school. It's designed to make us efficient workers, capable of memorization, capable of working long 8-hour days as mirrored in our school environments, capable of taking discipline when we eventually get to our jobs, and to make us capable enough to get jobs and feel okay staying in the jobs in the system that we have now, not the one that we idealize by making sense of unjust rules. So the repression that Firestone is speaking of has never truly left our educational system. It's just taken on a new role to, instead of repress the identity of the child, which some schools still do today, it has taken on a role to repress deviancy and to create good worker bees. And the worst part is that we don't get to learn about these things. It's not in our curriculum, and that's by design. We're too caught up with the actual busy work to actually interrogate the whys and hows behind why do I need to know all about the 1930s and memorize every single date and every single name. We're never taught the critical thinking skills to think about our society in a way to question how the system is designed. Something that's really important that I want all the adults here today to walk away with is that you hold so much power over youth in any context. I know a lot of us here might be educators, but this is also outside of educational spaces. And we need to recognize the power we hold in providing opportunities, issuing discipline, control over curriculum, and taking students' perspectives into account. In a classroom, it can often feel like teachers hold absolute power over students, over the material. And this is not necessarily their fault, but again, the fault of a system hell-bent on raking in good test scores, getting good funding and good grants from the state. It all goes upwards. So it's important that students also recognize the restrictions that our teachers, our educators have in the material they are required to teach, and the material that they want to teach. Adults in these contexts can also act as gatekeepers, either allowing more student partnership in developing a curriculum or sticking to the books and just doing what's required of us. Recognizing that as adults, you have the power to build up or break down student voice within your classroom, within our communities, everyday life. That's really the first step to actually implementing good youth-adult partnerships, which we will also discuss a little bit later in one of our breakout sessions. So what can we do? Well, you've taken the first step by coming to this summit today. I can't believe we have 100 people on right now, and we have 200 more that are going to receive the recordings after this and look through at their own pace. But the best that we can do is advocate and organize for youth rights. We will cover some strategies later in the youth organizing session and give time for discussion then. But it can be really hard to convince your peers to become passionate about change, especially when they feel so beaten down. Local organizing is no easy task, but persistence is what makes the difference. I've been doing this for 5 years already, and I have only just got a couple of my best friends to come around to actually taking action with me. Um, Continually educating your community can take an effect. And if you manage to teach one friend about the importance of taking back power within your school, or for adults, if you can convince other administrators, other educators, people that are high up, that will make a world of difference. Students can also do this too. It just takes conversations and talking with people and being willing to uh, listen to what they think, but also interject what you think. Um, and that one person that you teach is going to lead to another after, and another after that. It will take a lot of local and cultural change to make a large difference in the way that we view youth within school systems. But this is work that's already being done and is supported by large youth activism groups. Student Voice is one national organization committed to this work, but there are a number of others committed to making a difference on issues like racial injustice and climate change. Joining these groups or others is one way to create a path for legitimacy for yourself, among your peers, and among the adults in your lives. Because like we said earlier, we live in a merit-based society. So finding some kind of merit to attach yourself to legitimizes you. I don't think it should be that way, but that is how it is right now. Um, and educating on youth oppression is hard when you don't have an audience like this one that's already receptive to these ideas. If I talk to a stranger about youth oppression, they look at me like I'm crazy. Like, youth are oppressed? What? No. Um, but the best that we can do is try, use different language, try to know our audience better so that we can reach them on a deeper level. Um, but the worst that can happen truly is that we didn't reach as many people as we hoped, but we did reach somebody. You'll always be able to reach somebody with these ideas. It is not just you doing it by yourself, but you with the backup of Student Voice, all these other organizations providing us with the materials that we need to be able to educate ourselves so that we can know the material and educate others. That's what organizing is. That is what this summit is hoping to give you the tools that you need to be able to educate others. The last message today I want to leave you with from this session is that you should hold on to your idealism and your belief that better change is possible. Student Voice it doesn't just stop at speaking up for yourself, but it requires an idealist dream, a dream to reimagine our educational spaces, our societal spaces, our communities in a way that places youth first, with care and without threat. We need to recognize the marginalization of youth as a group. That is the first step to doing this educating, and reach for a new youth liberation movement. Honestly, it's time. If you don't know about the youth liberation movement of the 1960s, 70s, after this session, or even right now, you could look it up on Google, find the Wikipedia page. There is a ton of information, and recognize that youth are not free actors underneath the bureaucracy or the entangled system of administrators and school boards and the state, and even in some cases shareholders, in cases of universities that are holding power over you. There's so much more that we can demand and receive, but we have to be willing to take the risks as activists, organizers, advocates, and educators, for students in the process. Change doesn't come easy. I'm not saying it comes easy. This summit was by no means easy for everybody that was involved, but we're doing this, we're volunteering our time so that we can help other people see the change and help other people see the idealistic dream. Um, so I hope that throughout the summit, you'll be able to walk away with the tools and the knowledge that you need to lift the blindfold for others and inspire them to take action with you.